in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
This is David Tulis, a special edition of the David Tulis Show, brought to you by Nooga Radio and also Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. The website and multimedia platform run by the blogger with the biggest pen. That's me, David Tulis, and I do thank you for tuning in. We are in the middle of Sean Hannity. We are running a best of show today. Sean is on vacation, so to resume following our favorite national talk show host, Sean Hannity, just stay tuned here. And we will be picking up with Sean at 5 o'clock. Also, I'm the morning host, 9 o'clock every morning here at Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM and 1240 AM. And also our wonderful far-reaching HD channel, that is to say 95.3 HD4. That station reaches 60 miles. It has at least a 60-mile radius. And we're live on Facebook right now at Nooga Radio, and also always live on YouTube. This is David Tulis, a special news report today, and that is that Carol Gaddy, the stalwart woman who believes in her own rights and who believes in God, has been freed from jail in Sequatchie County in Dunlap. She's been there for 14 days, or she had been there 14 days, refusing to grant permission for an illegal search. Now, that sounds like a mouthful, but that's what's happened. She has refused permission for what city government called an inspection. An inspection which was based on an argument of claims made in court. This is a case that Dunlap city government has spat over itself on and thrown up over itself on, effectively urinated on its own leg regarding Carol Gaddy and her husband, Thomas. He is 71 years old. She is 69 years old. They have one son, Kelly, a carpenter, who has been involved with them helping his parents work on this house for 20 years, making improvements in what was a house in very bad shape, a former judge's house built after the war to prevent Southern independence. Kelly Gaddy has helped his parents courageously as her counsel. You have a right to counsel. She exercised that, and having him present her with arguments and filings and so on. Again, a carpenter helping his mother. These are pro se people, which means to say they are acting in their own capacity and not quite representing. They're involved in representing themselves. Now, probably better would be to be in persona propria, which is to say not pro se. Pro se, David Tulis, for example, would represent David Tulis. Well, that's an artificial thing that I would refuse. I would say, no, I'm not pro se. I'm in persona propria. I am myself, and I'm not representing myself. You see the difference? One is representation. One is yourself. In other words, the flesh and blood man, David Tulis, or the flesh and blood man, fill in your own name, or in this case, in Dunlap, the flesh and blood Carol Gaddy. And she is free tonight. She's celebrating her liberty. She apparently has some business to do in Chattanooga and is heading this way on private business, free, not having to live secretively and in hiding, as she has had to do for the past 3 months or so, when there was made against her and her husband Thomas an order of contempt, a finding of contempt, which required them to be jailed. They were jailed in a civil case with there is in that kind of contempt filing a criminal aspect to it, and I haven't had much time to study the laws on contempt in my private copy of American Jurisprudence. A dictionary was an encyclopedia set that runs 140 volumes, and I've got the whole set. By the way, if you have a copy of Tennessee Jurisprudence, or know a lawyer who's unloading some of his volumes, let me know. I would love to get a copy of Tennessee Jurisprudence to beef up my library and my own personal knowledge. Carol Gaddy is free tonight, and here is
what's today in court.
Jim Griffin.
Carol was brought out of the jail and before the judge on these
family friend
charges of obstructing justice or whatever.
It was contempt.
But anyway, contempt. And the city figured out a way out of this. In my way of thinking, they couldn't just throw the white flag up, but they accepted an official inspection that Carol and Thomas had paid for And as far as I'm concerned, Carol won her point in that she got to say who came and go on the property. They are both out. They're out from under the arrest warrants, period. And there's some things that have to be settled back and forth with the city on, a possible, some kind of a floodplain inspection or something like that. But they will work through that. And there was a lot of prayers that were answered, no question about it. And also, David, the publicity, I believe with all my heart, made all the difference. What you did, getting the word out, shaming the whole system. It's like you said in one of your press releases, this is going to affect a lot of people. And believe me, it will. It was a morning of Thanksgiving and release. And she is home, and I was so proud of her. Of course, Thomas was nowhere to be seen because he was on the lam. However, the last thing she did, she said, in my words, "Is my husband free to go?" And he said, "Yes, he's free to go. He's not under arrest either." So that was the coup de grace of the whole affair. And she said she would sleep in her own bed tonight instead of a hard metal pad hanging off the wall. She's been under solitary confinement, which is absolutely horrendous for the charges. And I just thank the Lord for everybody that did everything. It's not over. She still has her main thrust at the city of Dunlap, which she did bring that to the judge, that my friends and I got a law passed to examine whether or not Dunlap was actually ever annexed in 1972. And Carol did a marvelous job. You think about being in solitary for several days, not seeing anybody or talking to anyone. When we went to see her, nobody was allowed in except the immediate family. They were acting like a bunch of uptown hot doggers. We got a little power under their belt. So I was allowed to get in because I am a chaplain, and otherwise everyone else had to stay out. I gave them a hymnal to give to her, but no, she couldn't accept the hymnal because it had a hardback on it. And, you never know when someone throw a hymnal at you. You don't know what damage to do. So she did not get to have the hymnals with her, although they did allow a Bible. I guess that has a soft cover, and nobody get hurt for that. But it was a victory day for the cause of private property rights. And like I say, it's not over in the long run because they have these other matters that they will have to deal with. But the city backed out as best they could under the circumstances. And I am very grateful. But she looked and acted great.
This is David Tulis. We're hearing just now June Griffin, a friend from Dayton, telling about Carol Gaddy in Dunlap across the mountain. She was freed today by Judge Thomas Graham in circuit court. There was a hearing prompted by, among other things, a petition for writ of habeas corpus that demanded that she be presented, that she be given before a judge to review the claims against her. Now, as it happens, the claims against her were by the judge who today freed her, and that judge is Thomas Graham. It seems a little odd that the judges could not have had another jurist sit over that hearing today in circuit court, but the man who was her oppressor with his finding of contempt was today the one who released her, as it were, in a separate capacity, in a separate venue, and a distinct jurisdiction. This is David Tulis. The story of the victory of Carol Gaddy against oppression is really a remarkable one, and I think it makes some important points about being a belligerent claimant in person. And on that, I'll say this, that you don't have any rights. You, my listener, have no rights whatsoever if you do not assert them. You are required, if you have rights, if you're not a slave, whether you're black or whether you're white, you're required to maintain your rights. Rights are not self-executing. They do not defend themselves. They have to be defended by living people in their flesh and in their blood at the moment that those rights are challenged. At the very moment when they're challenged or denied, they have to be resisted at that point. At that moment, you have to do what Carol did. You have to invoke, assert, and protect your rights. That is to say, you have to invoke protect and assert your rights. And that is called being a belligerent claimant in person. That is language from a high court opinion that describes a man in a search who refuses to allow the search, and that the terminology is a legal term, and it's called belligerent claimant in person. Now, we're not used to being that, and very few people think that they can actually do that. And I'd like you, my listener, to think that maybe you could if you had to, maybe on some small point. But there is not, in many cases, law. There is not proper authority in many, many encounters between you, my listener, and officials. There's not authority for their claim against you, for their demands that you stop, for their demand that you show something or give something or pay something. Many, many cases have no basis at all. Many encounters have no basis at all. Does the necessity of city government, do administrative needs trump God-given, constitutionally guaranteed, inalienable or unalienable inherent rights? The answer is no, they don't. And that's there are two worlds in this Gaddy story, and that is as follows. And by the way, I'll have another sound file I wanted you to hear, and I'm seeing my partner on the screen here. I do want to have that other file put up for me. The two worlds are as follows: the world of city government of Dunlap, which is administrative needs, administrative desires, and administrative needs. Do they trump a constitutionally guaranteed right? Well, Camara versus Municipal Court, a case from the 1960s, makes it very clear that if a person says no, then there is no way that municipal necessity or problems or needs will trump the right to be freed from a search without a warrant. Okay, in that case, it was a renter, and I think a government landlord demanding the right of inspection, and there simply wasn't that authority. It didn't exist, and
in-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Sorry, I'm trying to play the Kelly Gaddy file, and here it is. Let me click the button and see if it works. I can't make it work, so just forgive me. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that when you have a claim, you have to present your claim in your person, in your flesh. And here Carol Gaddy, who's a 69-year-old woman. She's a formerly real estate. She's married, has one child, has some grandchildren, and she is putting her body on the line. What that means is she's defending her rights in her natural person, in her bodily, physical person. And they had
here we go.
Filed. Okay, yeah. Let me play that. Here's her son Kelly.
Request,
this is what happened today.
On,
listen.
Our conformance to Ordinance 88, basically, it was talked about earlier today, and the judge, the city's representatives there, I think Swafford was representing Greer. Greer was not there, but they said that Attorney they would accept our newly construction engineer report to answer for the writ, the writ of compliance that the judge had ordered that originally for them to be incarcerated. So that issue was addressed, and that was the only thing pretty much was addressed, and then she was released. Of course, I had to end up paying another $2,500 bond on a general sessions with Tommy Austin on a hearing that she had previously over there, even to even get her out of there. So basically, we had to fork out another $287 to get her out, even though Judge Graham finally released her from custody. I had to pay another bond, to a permanent bond, to get her out on that situation. That was a failure to appear. So those are issues we still got to get addressed. I think September 5th, next court date in general sessions with Tommy Austin.
All right, let's back up, Kelly. Let's talk about the main issue. That's the secondary issue. The main issue is that Mr. Fields' engineering report, his inspection in late July of your parents' house, found it 100% solid with no doubts or questions about its solidity, its safety. And that report, that one-page letter stamped with his certification stamp, plus the photographs, was accepted in lieu of a search. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. Yep. Yeah, but there's still issues. He said the judge has made comment that the city may still require hydraulic testing and so forth, and just kind of rattled on a bunch of other stuff that's been dealing with in this court case. But I think they're really wanting to try to, their infractions is causing a spotlight on them now, and I think they're wanting to try to get rid of the case and close this case out. That was the judge's words on the bench today. We think that cooler heads are forwarding here, and hopefully you guys can get this stuff worked out, so to speak, and that's basically the game they're playing.
This is David Tulis. We're brought to you by Nooganomics.com. We have a special report this evening. We're hearing Kelly Gaddy just now, and his mother Carol is out of jail after 14 days in Sequatchie County, and the judge accepted a reasonable proposal, and that was that a certified engineer's report about the condition of the disputed house is acceptable. It meets the requirements of Ordinance 88, and Mrs. Gaddy is free, and her husband Thomas no longer need be a fugitive. They are back in their house, and Mrs. Gaddy tells me she has a business in Chattanooga, and she's coming this way this evening. An important case, and we're hearing more now from Kelly Gaddy in an interview he gave me just a few minutes ago.
But they're free. They're free to roam now. They're not exiled from their house, so that attachment warrant is off of them. There's no more warrants that they're are wanted.
What about the prohibition on continuing repairs and renovations? What about that, Kelly?
Those are issues that really have never been addressed as far as from the city. The only thing they stopped at doing was trying to get their try to come in on our property and take photographs and videos. So that's been upheld as far as them not having to do that anymore.
Right, but
so
my question, Kelly Gaddy, is about the prohibition on improvements and renovations, because that was stopped by Judge Graham, right? Didn't Thomas Graham prohibit any work on the house until all these issues were settled? Is that order now vacated as well?
No, that's something that's still pending, and that was something that originally that Jeffrey F. Stewart, who recused himself off the case, had instituted that. And that's something that we'll continue to have to file papers in the court addressing those issues. That's something that we'll have to try to get a release on it so we can continue to do what we need to do.
And that's because that issue was not addressed today, because the issue today was the jailing of Mrs. Gaddy, right? That was the main issue. Why is she in jail? And that issue was addressed, though these others were not.
That is correct. That was the only thing that was up on the docket today, and that was one of the points that Ms. Swafford addressed. She didn't want anything else to be addressed or heard, even though Carol pressed the point to try to.
Explain to my listener who Mrs. Swafford is. Who is that?
She is one of the agents over there under, one of the lawyers representing the firm for Greer now. Stephen Greer was not there in court, but Miss Swafford was there. According to what Mom said, that's who Miss Swafford is. And this was the first time I've ever seen this lady in the court.
Her name is Russell Ann
Ann
Swafford.
Women that's always been in the court when Stephen Greer wasn't there. And this is the first time I saw her in court against Mom. Evidently, she was in court on Mom's original hearing back on the 22nd in General Sessions, apparently. But that was I didn't know who she was, but they evidently that, according to Mom, that's Miss Swafford. She's part of that law firm of Greer, Stephen Greer, Adams and Swafford, or something like that. So like we have said in front before, Stephen Greer initiated this thing, but everybody that's involved in his law firm over there has had a hand in this case, our own case, proliferating this fraudulent, report of our house being, a disastrous, deemed to be torn down type, lie that's been perpetrated here. And they've pretty much backstepped on it now based on this report. This report has really solidified the truth and confronted the lies of what they've been perpetrating for this 2.5 years. Our house is dilapidated and deems to be torn down. So we put that lie, fortunately, to flight based on this last filing we did. He did make mention of the habeas corpus that was filed, but said that that's kind of a moot issue now because they're releasing her. So that didn't, even though the county representing that situation was there, Judge Graham stated that was a moot issue now, that we don't have to address the habeas because they're letting her out. So that's what took place.
Yeah, the habeas is written against the sheriff who holds the prisoner, and it demands that the sheriff present the body of the prisoner, Mrs. Gaddy, to the judge, and the judge is then supposed to say, why, Mr. Sheriff, are you holding this person who is being here apparently without authority, apparently outside of the law? So as Kelly Gaddy is explaining, he is the son of Carol Gaddy. That petition was mooted by the finding of Judge Thomas Graham in Sequatchie County Circuit Court this morning, that the engineer's report that you can read yourself, it's a very brief one-page report with his engineering stamp, his estate seal on the bottom of that letter, stating that the disputed house of Carol and Thomas Gaddy, in fact, is in perfectly good condition, suggesting that the whole of the city's case was a kind of a fraud against this couple, has brought them 2.5 years of grief. Now, this is David Tulis, and I have contacted Stephen Greer, the attorney, and I left a voice message with him asking him to come on the program today. And I've also left a message with Russell and Ann Stewart, a woman attorney who in today's action represented the city, but they may have been unavailable because there it's an hour earlier than here, and now it's nearing 5 o'clock, and there it's nearing 4 o'clock. So they may have been about city business representing Stephen Greer's attorney practice that serves the city government. Dwayne Land, I did not renew efforts to reach Dwayne Land, who's the mayor, who is really the start of this whole story. And we don't know the personal reasons that Mayor Land demanded that this property be torn down or demanded an inspection. We don't really know the personal reasons. He is a major landlord in the city. And supporters of Carol Gaddy were rather dismayed at my very favorable report about him, though you could say he's a slumlord, but I object to terms like that because he serves the low-end market among many poor people in Sequatchie County and in Dunlap, running trailer homes, renting out all kinds of trailer homes to people who everyone I talked to in a tour of some of his properties were favorable to him. So he's called a Christian man. He's seen in very favorable light by his renters, even though they may live in seemingly shabby circumstances. It's what they can afford, right? And so they have these older model trailer homes, and the row of mailboxes out in the front of Land Road, I think one of the roads near the Walmart in Dunlap, every mailbox on there is rusted down to the very bottom. There's hardly any bit of paint or shine on any of those mailboxes. Kind of all low maintenance, or maybe high maintenance, and the mayor's property. But this case is apart from that story. Okay, that story was just kind of to see why a man who runs shabby rental properties wants to tear down a very fine house and threaten the people in it with his demolition if they don't consent to a search. And the whole case has been a disaster for Dunlap. But today, Dunlap is freeing itself from the mess that Mayor Land has made on behalf of the people of that city. And I think Mr. and Mrs. Gaddy had a great deal of support, though people in Dunlap, they're kind of quiet about supporting. There's a kind of an atmosphere of fear about the administration of that city, that is to say, Mayor Land. And so there's strong personal feelings among many people in Dunlap. But the report tonight is that Mrs. Gaddy is free. The city is relinquishing the worst of its claims, if you will, against her. The judge ended his ban upon his jailing of her under a contempt finding. And she is now free, and she and her husband are celebrating their liberty. Some details are not settled yet about the continuing upkeep and upgrade of that lovely old house in Dunlap. But the Carol Gaddy story seems today to be over. She has been liberated, and the city is trying to put the best face on a bad civil prosecution. This is David Tulis, special report. Thank you.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.